Imagine going to a funeral and the person who died is actually giving the eulogy.
Oh,
Or let's say you could talk to someone years after they passed away, all thanks to AI.
yeah. That's definitely some serious sci-fi stuff.
Right.
That's what's actually happening right now in China.
It's pretty crazy.
And it's making people ask some really interesting questions.
For sure. And today we are diving deep into AI and digital afterlives.
Absolutely. We've got news reports, company info, expert opinions, all that good stuff.
So let's get into it.
Sounds good.
One of the stories that really stood out to me was about this guy, Kuhn, in China.
Oh, yeah. I read about him.
So he loses his mom and is just devastated.
Understandably so.
Totally. And he just couldn't cope with the loss.
Mm-hmm.
So what does he do?
What?
He creates an AI avatar of her using old photos and videos.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
dedication.
And get this, he doesn't stop there.
He doesn't.
Nope, he starts a whole company to help other people do the same thing.
Now that's interesting.
Right. Like he turned his grief into this way to help others going through something similar.
I mean, it makes sense when you think about it.
For sure.
We all want to hold on to our loved ones, right?
Totally. And his company is now blown up.
Really?
Yeah, 500 employees, and they've made thousands of these digital avatars.
That's amazing.
And the tech behind these avatars is seriously impressive.
Yeah, how do they actually work?
So it's not just a picture.
Okay.
They use AI algorithms to make the avatars talk and act like the person they're based on. They use tons of data, photos, videos, emails, you name it,
Oh, wow.
all to capture the essence of that person.
That's pretty wild.
It is wild to think you could actually have a conversation with a loved one who's gone.
Yeah, almost like they're still there.
Exactly. But it makes you wonder about the cost.
Oh, for sure. Like, how much does something like this cost?
Well, these avatars can range from around 6,600 to 150,000, depending on how complex they are.
150,000?
It's a serious investment.
That's more than some people make in a year.
Yeah, it's not just a financial commitment either.
Yeah, you're essentially paying to preserve a memory.
Exactly. And it's not just for one-on-one interactions either.
What do you mean?
There's a cemetery in Shanghai,
Okay.
and they've developed an AI system where the deceased can actually participate in their own funerals.
Hold on. Participate how?
So mourners can actually interact with the AI during the funeral.
So they can, like, talk to them.
Pretty much.
Whoa.
It's definitely a unique way to personalize a funeral.
Yeah, and maybe even offer some closure for loved ones.
But it is a bit strange, right?
It's definitely pushing the boundaries.
Like, are we messing with the lines between life and death?
Yeah, could it actually make grieving harder in the long run?
That's the big question.
And it's a question that psychologists are really starting to look into.
Right, because there are a lot of different opinions on the psychological effect.
Totally. Some think it could be comforting, letting people say a proper goodbye.
Yeah, but others worry it could prolong grief and prevent people from accepting the loss.
It's tough because there's no easy answer.
Definitely. And then there's this company called Fu Shou Yuan International.
What do they do?
They have a service where loved ones can hear the voice of the deceased.
Oh, wow. I can see how that could be really comforting for some.
Right, especially right after someone passes away.
Yeah.
But it raises ethical questions too.
Like what?
Well, did the deceased person actually consent to having their voice used like that?
That's a really good point.
It's something we have to think about more and more as our world becomes more digital.
For sure. And as AI gets even more advanced, these questions are only going to get tougher. I mean, we have to remember that people have always looked for ways to remember their loved ones.
That's true.
For centuries, we've used photos, letters, recordings, all sorts of things.
Yeah, but those have always been more like looking back on the past.
Right. Passive remembrance.
Exactly. And what we're seeing now with AI is more like active remembrance.
Yeah, it's a pretty big shift.
We've gone from just seeing a photo to potentially having a whole conversation with a digital version of that person.
It's definitely interesting to think about.
How does that even impact how we grieve, you know?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, right?
I guess so.
And the research shows there are potential upsides and downsides.
Like what?
On the one hand, these technologies can be a totally new way to keep those memories alive. Like, imagine being able to hear a loved one's voice years after they're gone.
I could see that being really helpful for people who've lost someone suddenly.
Yeah, or maybe they didn't get to say goodbye properly.
It could give them a sense of closure or let them say things they never got the chance to.
And for some people, it could even help with feelings of guilt or regret.
Almost like a way to work through those emotions.
Right, kind of like digital therapy in a way.
But then there's that other side we talked about earlier, how this tech could actually mess with the grieving process.
Yeah, it's a valid concern.
Grief is about accepting the loss and learning to live without that person.
Right. Exactly.
But if you're always interacting with this digital version, it's like you're not really facing reality.
It's like you're holding onto a ghost instead of moving forward.
And couldn't you get too attached to that simulation?
Oh, absolutely.
Like, even prefer the digital version to the real person with all their flaws and quirks.
I mean, AI is programmed to be consistent.
Yeah, but real people are messy and complicated.
Exactly, and that's part of what makes them human.
And let's not forget that technology isn't perfect either.
Oh, right.
What if the AI makes a mistake or says something totally out of character?
That could be really upsetting for someone who's already grieving.
Especially if they're already feeling vulnerable.
It's important to remember that these are just tools.
Yeah.
And like any tool, they can be used for good or bad.
It's about being responsible with how we develop and use them.
Exactly. And having open and honest conversations about the potential impact.
It's a pretty crazy crossroads we're at, right?
It really is.
The technology colliding with our emotions and our ideas about life and death.
Totally.
And it's not just happening in China.
Right.
This is a global thing.
There are companies in the US working on similar stuff.
Like Storyfile.
Yeah, they create these digital humans.
I've heard about them.
People are even calling these AI creations dead bots.
Dead bots. It's kind of creepy, but also catchy.
I know, right?
It really makes you think about what it means to be human.
For sure. Like, what is consciousness?
And where do we draw the line between honoring the past and basically rewriting it?
Big questions.
But it's interesting to look at this in the context of how people have always remembered their dead.
Oh, yeah.
Like, different cultures have all these rituals and traditions. So maybe these AI avatars are just a modern version of that.
That's an interesting way to look at it.
Maybe it's just another way to connect with those we've lost.
But are these new tools actually helping us grieve?
Or are they creating a whole new set of problems?
It's complicated, that's for sure.
It seems like every step forward with AI brings more questions.
Definitely.
And one of the biggest ones is about consent.
Right. Did the deceased person actually agree to have their data used like this?
What if they wouldn't have wanted to be brought back as a digital version?
It's tough because they're not here to tell us.
And even if they left some kind of instructions,
Yeah.
technology changes so fast.
How do we know what they would have wanted now?
Exactly.
And even beyond that, there are bigger ethical things to consider.
Like what?
How does this affect the people who are still alive? Could these technologies lead to unrealistic expectations?
Or even replace real-life relationships?
It's a possibility.
What if people become so focused on their digital relationships that they isolate themselves?
It could happen.
And we can't forget about the potential for abuse.
Oh, absolutely.
Like using these technologies to manipulate people or exploit them.
It's like anything else, there's always a dark side.
It feels like we're walking a tightrope here.
I agree.
On one side, you have the potential for comfort and connection.
And a new way to honor our loved ones.
But on the other side, there are real risks.
We have to be careful.
It's up to all of us to make sure this technology is used the right way.
We need to be thoughtful and responsible.
And make sure it's actually benefiting people.
Exactly.
Wow, we've really gone deep on this one.
Yeah, it's a lot to think about.
So much to unpack with AI and death and all these ethical questions.
It feels like we're just scratching the surface.
Right. And it's all changing so fast.
It's hard to even imagine what things will look like in a few years.
So where do we go from here? What do you think the future holds for all of this?
It's tough to predict the future, but AI is only going to get more powerful and more integrated into our lives.
Yeah, that seems like a given.
I think we'll see a lot more ways to use AI for remembrance.
Like what?
Think personalized virtual memorials, interactive digital legacies that can be passed down.
It's like we're entering a whole new era of remembrance, where the line between the physical and digital is blurring.
And that raises some big questions.
Yeah, like if we can actually interact with digital versions of our loved ones, will it change how we grieve?
I don't know if there's an easy answer to that.
Right. Grief is so personal.
Everyone experiences it differently.
For some people, maybe interacting with a digital version could be comforting.
Like a way to stay connected.
But for others, it could make it harder to let go.
It could hold them back.
It's a delicate balance.
And we have to be really sensitive to that.
And those ethical considerations we talked about are still huge.
Especially consent.
Did the person actually want this?
We have to make sure we're respecting their wishes and not just doing what we want.
It all comes down to using this technology responsibly and ethically.
It's a shared responsibility for developers, for companies, for individuals.
We all have a part to play in shaping the future of this stuff.
Absolutely.
Well, I think we've given our listeners a lot to chew on today.
A lot to ponder.
It's a conversation that needs to keep going.
As AI keeps changing the world, we need to keep talking about it.
We need to stay informed and keep asking those tough questions.
Only then can we make sure we're using these powerful tools in a way that benefits everyone.
I think that's a great place to leave it.
Yeah, food for thought.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into digital afterlives.
It's been a fascinating journey.
And until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep learning.